house sits quiet in the early morning. Inside, a television glows with static. A small dog paces, restless. 3 purses rest in a doorway, undisturbed. The beds look slept in. The cars are in the driveway. But the women who lived here are gone. Not missing in the way we understand missing. Not taken in a moment of violence that left evidence behind. Simply absent. As though they stepped out of the world and closed the door behind them. This is June 7th, 1992. Springfield, Missouri. This is the story of 3 women who vanished so completely. The most disturbing fact is how little happened at all. Cheryl Levitt was 47 years old in the summer of 1992. A hairdresser by trade, well liked in her community. She had recently purchased a modest home on East Delmare Street. It was a fresh start. She was making it a place for herself and her daughter. Her daughter, Susie Streeter, was 19. Bright bleached blonde hair, a high school graduate as of June 6, with plans to follow her mother into the cosmetology business. The kind of girl who had her whole future ahead of her. Stacy McCall was 18, Susie's close friend. They'd just graduated together from Kickapoo High School the day before. She wasn't supposed to be at that house. Not originally. But plans change. And sometimes that changes everything. The night. Everything changed. June 6th, 1992 was graduation day. For Susie and Stacy, it should have been a night they remembered forever for all the right reasons. Caps and gowns, cameras flashing, the weightless feeling of being young and finished with one chapter standing on the edge of the next. After the ceremony, they did what teenagers do. They went to parties. They moved between friends' houses, celebrating, laughing, making plans that shifted as the night wore on. Their original idea was to crash at a friend's place or maybe a hotel. But one house was too crowded with visiting family. Another plan fell through. So sometime after 2 in the morning, they made a simple decision. They would go back to Susie's house. At 11:15 that night, hours before the girls arrived, Cheryl Levitt was on the phone with a friend. Light conversation. She mentioned painting a chest of drawers. It was an ordinary Saturday night phone call. It was the last time anyone would hear her voice. Susie and Stacy pulled up to 1717 East Delmare Street around 2:15 a.m. They parked their cars in the driveway. They went inside. And then, in a window of time no longer than 6 hours, something happened. No screams were heard. No neighbors reported disturbances. No alarms were triggered. When the sun rose over Springfield on the morning of June 7th, the house was silent. And Cheryl Levitt, Susie Streeter, and Stacy McCall were no longer inside. The discovery. Janelle Kirby had plans with Susie and Stacy that morning. They were supposed to go to a water park. When her phone calls went unanswered, she thought it was strange, but not alarming. Maybe they'd overslept. Maybe they forgot. She and her boyfriend drove over to the house. That's when things started to feel wrong. The porch light was shattered. Not the bulb, just the glass globe that covered it. Shards were scattered across the porch. The front door was unlocked. They called out. No answer. Inside, the house was still. Cinnamon, Cheryl, and Susie's Yorkshire Terrier was pacing anxiously but unharmed. In the doorway of Susie's bedroom, 3 purses sat in a neat row. Cheryl's, Susie's, Stacy's. Inside them, keys, cash, cigarettes, personal belongings, all untouched. The television in Susie's room was on, displaying nothing but static. The girls' graduation clothes from the night before were folded. Makeup had been removed. Cheryl's bed looked slept in, but there was no one there. Janelle and her boyfriend stood in that house, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The scene didn't suggest violence. It suggested interruption, like someone had pressed pause on 3 lives and never hit play again. They made a mistake then, one born of good intentions. They swept up the broken glass on the porch, thinking they were helping. They didn't realize they might be destroying evidence. They also listened to the answering machine. There was a message on it, something strange, something that didn't make sense. In a moment of confusion, it was erased before anyone could record or fully understand what it said. Hours passed. More calls went unanswered. By that evening, Stacy's parents, Janice and Stu McCall, drove to the house themselves. When Janice walked through that same unlocked door and saw the same eerie stillness, she knew. She called the police. When officers arrived and surveyed the scene, they understood immediately that this was not a typical missing persons case. There had been no struggle, no forced entry, no signs of violence. But 3 women were gone, and they had left everything behind. The investigation. The response was immediate. The Springfield Police Department, the FBI, and the Missouri State Highway Patrol launched a coordinated search. But from the very beginning, investigators faced a problem that would define this case for decades. There was almost nothing to work with. Forensic teams combed the house on Delmare Street. No blood, no unidentified fingerprints, no evidence of a break-in. Whoever had entered that house, if anyone had, either had been let in willingly or had left no trace of forced entry. The scene was clean. Disturbingly clean. The only anomaly was the broken porch light, a single isolated detail in an otherwise ordinary home. But the items left behind told investigators everything they needed to know about intent. People don't leave voluntarily in the middle of the night without their cars, without their purses, without their money, their keys, their cigarettes. They don't leave a frightened dog alone. This was an abduction, and it had happened fast. Over the following months and years, police pursued more than 5,000 tips. They searched the Ozark wilderness. They followed leads that stretched across state lines. They interviewed hundreds of people. Nothing materialized. No bodies were found. No credible witnesses came forward. No physical evidence surfaced. Then, on December 31st, 1992, something strange happened. A man called the America's Most Wanted hotline. He claimed to have what he called prime knowledge of what happened to the 3 women. The operator tried to transfer him to Springfield investigators. The call disconnected. Police issued public pleas for the man to call back. He never did. In 1997, 5 years after their disappearance, Cheryl Levitt and Susie Streeter were legally declared dead. It was a formality, a legal necessity for their families. But their case files remain open. Officially, they are still listed as missing. The absence of evidence became the evidence itself. And that absence has haunted this case ever since. The unanswered questions. When there is no evidence, there are only theories. Over 30 years, names have surfaced. Suspects have been considered. but no one has ever been charged. One early person of interest was connected to Susie Streeter. He had been arrested for robbing a mausoleum, an act Susie reportedly found repulsive. There was speculation she might have planned to testify against him. The theory suggested retaliation, but investigators could never find enough to move forward. Another name is Robert Craig Cox. A convicted kidnapper and robber, Cox was also a suspect in an unrelated murder in Florida. In 1997, while incarcerated in Texas, he told reporters he knew the women had been killed. He claimed their bodies would never be found. Cox had worked at the same company as Stacy McCall's father. But investigators largely dismissed his statements as attention-seeking. He said he would reveal the truth after his mother died. When she passed, he offered nothing. Other names have circulated in true crime communities. Larry Dwayne Hall, Gerald Carnahan, each theory built on circumstantial connections, geographic proximity, or behavioral patterns. None have led to arrests. One prevailing theory suggests the perpetrator was someone known to at least one of the women. It would explain the lack of forced entry. Perhaps someone came to the door late that night. Perhaps they were invited in. Perhaps an argument escalated, or something was planned all along. In this version, Cheryl and Stacy may have simply been in the wrong place. But every theory ends the same way. Without a body, without a confession, without evidence, there is no proof. Only speculation. A case that remains open. More than 3 decades have passed. For the families of Cheryl Levitt, Susie Streeter, and Stacy McCall, time has not brought closure. Only endurance. Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, became an advocate for missing persons. She fought to keep her daughter's story alive, to prevent the case from fading into obscurity. She continued that fight until her own death. The disappearance left a mark on Springfield, Missouri. A community that had felt safe suddenly understood how fragile that safety was. The house on East Delmare Street became a landmark of tragedy, a place people drove past and wondered about. In 1997, a memorial bench was placed in the victim's memorial garden at Phelps Grove Park, a quiet place to remember 3 lives that were stolen. The case has been featured on America's Most Wanted, on 48 Hours, on Disappeared. Each time, there's hope that someone watching will remember something, that a detail will click into place. The Springfield Police Department insists the case is still active. Tips are still received. Leads are still followed. A reward of $43,000 remains available for information leading to the location of the women and the conviction of those responsible. The hope is that someone knows something, that after all this time, a conscience will break, a secret will slip, that somewhere there is an answer.